Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and today is going to be one of those intros where I'm not going to reveal too many spoilers because I just had an incredibly cool conversation with Nicolas Vandenberghe from ChiliPiper. And yes, we talk about things about the value of leveraging AI for inbound conversion. But we also just had a fantastic chat, and he even calmly shared a story about sitting down with Steve Jobs. So if you're a tech fan, an Apple fan, you're going to love today's episode. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way stateside, where Nicolas Vandenberghe from ChiliPiper is waiting to share his story, the work they're doing at ChiliPiper, and a few cool anecdotes too. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm the co-founder of ChiliPiper, a company that helps businesses convert their inbound leads. As you can hear, I'm sure your audience will hear, I'm originally French. I came to the US a long time ago. I went to Stanford Business School in the mid-90s with the intention of traveling the world. And I was exposed to a little gathering with Steve Jobs at that time. And Steve Jobs sat on the floor. It was at his lowest point. He was doing a company called Next. And the joke was he was going next to nowhere. And he sat down and he explained how, yet even if he was struggling, he was going to change the world one way or the other, for sure. And I looked at him and I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be a tech entrepreneur. So since the mid-90s, I've been a tech entrepreneur. I've done 5 companies. That's my number 5.
Wow. I mean, we've got to go. As this is a daily tech podcast, it would be criminal of me not to go there. But what did you take away from your time there, even if it was just brief and he was sat on the floor and you're having that conversation? Was it clear straight away that he wasn't just a guy that wanted to change the world, but he would do it? Because I also had John Scully on this podcast a few years ago.
Did you? I actually worked with John Scully.
No.
That's amazing. I did. So it's the irony of fate that I was inspired by Steve Jobs, and I did my first company as a joint venture with John Scully. The very guy who inspired Steve Jobs. I know it's strange. And so it was the 95 to 98. And at the time it was even though Steve Jobs was not quite the Jobs that we now know. Steve Jobs was already, John Scully was already apologetic about the whole thing. Like he would say, I remember his quote was to say that Apple was not a company, it was a cult. So he could not operate it because it was a cult, which I thought was a bit of an easy way out. But I work with John, and so I learned a lot of the so, for example, the thing that's quoted in his book that Steve Jobs said that you're going to come change the world with me or continue selling sugar water. Like a true quote. He really did say that. But back to your question, thing that struck me when Steve Jobs sat on the floor is that strong belief that it was possible. Like it was possible. Like like you can change the world and you just put your mind to it. And I later saw a bunch of interviews where he said that something that happened to him is that he realized that everything around us is actually designed by people that he says are no smarter than you, right? So the couch behind you, that mic you're using, actually designed by people no smarter than you. And if you put your mind to it, then you'll be able to change these things and create other things that will impact the world. And obviously, not everybody is Steve Jobs, and not everybody invented the iPhone. But the idea that you can focus on a problem and come up with solutions that better than existing is reasonable. It's reasonable. It's reasonable to think that if you put your mind to something, you'll do something better than was before. So that sense of possibility is what inspired me, and it felt like to me, it felt like once you know that, then you feel that everything else is a waste of time. I know it's a funny thing to say, you see, but if I think I can create something that's going to change, improve the life of others, then why would I go and, I don't know, be an accountant or Nothing wrong with these jobs, but it just felt like that's what I should be doing.
Yeah, I remember from the John Scully interview as well. He was saying that he was in a room with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and there was somebody else in that room, and they were talking about the importance of having a noble cause. That you've got to be working on something that's bigger than yourself and your company, and change the world. So I know it wasn't just a soundbite in a book; it was something that these guys lived and breathed. But if I take you back way before then, can you remember where your passion for tech came from, what lit the spark, and what it was that put you on this path you're on and shaped you as a person?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I grew up in Marseille, in the south of France, and it was a poor town, and I can tell you there was no entrepreneur to think of. So I didn't know the concept of entrepreneurship, but I was good in mathematics. And in France, if you're good in mathematics, you're driven through the educational system, which ended up taking me to École Polytechnique in Paris, which is this big French institution. And there, I was exposed to the big companies administration, and the computer that we were taught at the time was extremely boring. So it was like we had this thing called Lisp that was super advanced and abstract, but everything else was COBOL done by what's now Accenture. It looked super boring to me, so I had zero interest in tech. I went to do marketing at Procter & Gamble. I went to sell soap. If you know the Zest soap.
Yes.
I was assistant brand manager on this. Had all these soaps on my desk, and we came up with different flavors. So it was not only lemon, it was also blue waves and stuff. So I did that, and I found that super boring. So that's when I moved to London, and I started working in consulting for a spin-off of the Boston Consulting Group. I worked for Lloyds Bank in the UK doing the strategy. I did all sorts of projects that were very exciting, but none of them were tech. So that's the reason when I went to Stanford, I had no understanding of tech and interest in tech. So it was a very, very precise moment, that Steve Jobs interview. It was early in my time at Stanford. It was actually a classmate of mine called Steve Jefferson, who's now on to great things, who invited Steve Jobs. And it just flipped. I never thought there was this world called technology, that people invent things and these things are useful. And of course, they're very successful also, because you can see that success in Silicon Valley is very fast. That's the thing that's also fascinating, right? So you see a guy say, I started last year and now I have 100 employees, something like that, which actually happened to me in one of my companies. So that combination of a big mission and the fact that things can change quickly, I thought was fascinating, and that's where I ended. So it was very, very, very precise moment when my passion for tech happened. I wasn't born with it.
And of course, it was that path that led you to ChiliPiper. And one of the things that stood out for you, and one of the reasons I invited you on this podcast today, is if you scroll down your newsfeed right now, everybody's talking about the Great Resignation, the future of work, hybrid working, etc. But it's almost like you guys were way ahead of your time, because you built your company on how you thought the future, on the future that you thought businesses should act and should operate. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you guys are working and how remote working or hybrid working is nothing new to you?
Absolutely. We were remote before it was fashionable. I have to add one important point that people sometimes find odd. My co-founder is my wife.
Wow.
So, well, that's right. So, and the odd piece of it is usually often there's this cliche that the man is the geek and the woman is the PR woman, right? Yeah. Well, she's the geek and I'm the PR person. So that's why I'm on the show today. She's actually has a master of computer science from a Polytechnic in Bucharest. And so she heads our product. And when we started the company, we early on were in it for the long term. So we didn't want to do a quick win. It was like this is what was our baby, our projects. We wanted to be in a company for the long term. So we immediately started building on what we thought what we wanted. So Alina is from Romania and I'm from France. So we hired our two early employees in Ukraine, actually, as would happen, and one guy in Romania. And our idea was that, look, we know from a fact that there are smart people everywhere. And we know also that we love traveling and that people should be able to work from anywhere they want. So that was the foundation. We hired a guy in Bucharest, two guys in Ukraine. One of the guys in Ukraine wanted to go to Montenegro to be by the sea. And we said, that's great. Alina and I decided to move to Brooklyn. So we moved to Brooklyn. And so that was the foundation of the company. And from there, every time we had to make a decision, we didn't think, what do other companies do? We thought, what is it that we would like? Right. So, for example, once a year we get together. You will love that example. We get all the company together and we go somewhere. And in 2019, I thought, what is it I would like to do this year? And I thought I'd like to do the closing of the Basha Club in Ibiza. That's what I'd like to do, right? Because that's cool, right?
Yeah.
So I thought I'm going to take the entire company to do the closing of the Basha Club in Ibiza, because I figured if I think it's cool, then they'll think it's cool, probably, right? And sure enough, they did. We all went. We rented these mansions in Ibiza, with a big party with a pool, and we did the closing of the Basha with all sorts of champagne, and that was an amazing experience. And so if you go with not what you see other companies doing, but what you think is you really enjoy, and of course, if you can make it happen, then it's a different world. And that's how we've been operating. So whenever we have a question and people say, like if we hire somebody who has a process to do things, I'll always question it. I said, I understand you do that, but is there a good reason why you would do that? So an example is, it's a funny thing, is employee retention. Yeah. We have no target for employee retention. And it seems that that's the secret to having high employee retention, is to have no target for everybody. So when people come, I said, look, we're here to help you grow. That's our value proposition to our employees. You're going to have fun because you're free, you're autonomous, you do what you want, the hours you want, the place you want. We send you a computer, and from there you go wherever you want. We're only going to look at your output, but we're going to make sure that you have the opportunity to develop professionally. So we actually have this thing called, so we call ourselves the Pipers because we're ChiliPiper, so the employees are Pipers. And by the way, I don't know if you saw that, but there's a band in Scotland called the Red Hot Chili Pipers. No. And people get confused and they think they buy tickets for Red Hot Chili Peppers and they show up and this guy's doing the pipes, like, whoa.
That's brilliant.
Anyway, I should invite them at the next company trip, the Pipers. They're actually very good. They can play a kind of rock, kind of a cornemuse. Anyway, so the Pipers have a Piper plan where they set everybody who comes on board sets how they see themselves growing, what they'd like to do in their career. So you can start as a salesperson, for example, and say, I really want to go into marketing, or I really love to do customer success, and then we're going to help you grow into that position. So we've hired, by now we have 3 internal coaches who help people build their career plan. And if that career plan mean that you're going to continue outside of ChiliPiper, we're completely okay with that, because it's a strong belief that people should do what's best for them, right? And so we meet together. We have at least a moment that coincide, and if we can do what's best for them for years, that's great. And if it's better for them to go aside, that's fine with us too. So we've invested in this career development much earlier than usually the kind of thing that only happen when you get to General Electric size, then they start having career planning and all that. But for us, it was very early on. I think we were like 20 employees who started doing that process. We also changed. So it's a funny thing. Our company, we haven't talked about what we do, but we make meetings happen, right? It's all about helping inbound book meetings faster, better. And yet I make the claim that we're the meetings company that doesn't like meetings. So we really like meetings with our customers, but I have a phobia of internal meetings because I've seen, as companies get bigger, these internal meetings are super boring. Where you just you're watching Facebook and people say, "Hey, what was that?" Yeah, well, and so we have this. We avoid these internal meetings as much as we can, and we've discovered a secret weapon to kill internal meetings. It came from looking at what Jeff Bezos does at Amazon. So you may have heard that when he started Amazon, he asked his employees to never come to a meeting with a PowerPoint. He said, I want you to write a memo, a 6-page memo of what the issue is, what the topics are. And when we start the meeting, everybody read the memo, and then we can have a discussion and make a decision. The logic of that is that if you write a 6-page memo, you have to get into a lot more details and facts than if you just do a PowerPoint with option A or option B. So we started doing that, but of course, we all remote. So I said, look, that memo that you're writing, just put it on the Google Docs so that everybody can access it. And then the writer of the memo typically would post it maybe the day before. So then everybody would have access to it. So instead of using the time in the meeting, we would read it before the meeting. Mm-hmm. And then we found that on Google Doc, you can comment. So you can give your views, give any line. And by the time the meeting happens, everything was clear already because everybody has commented, right, on that memo. We call that a decision memo. Everybody commented, give their views, and it's very simple. In most cases, it converges. So people can to agree that an option is better. It's very clear. When it diverges, it means we don't have enough information. So we say we need to do another round. But as a result, the meeting is no longer needed, right? We don't need that meeting. The decision is made on its own online, asynchronously. So that's an example of process that I think is going to be the future as more and more companies explore remote work. They'll have to think, well, how do we make decisions in a remote environment, right? How do we collaborate? So there's a very simple tools like a Google Doc that enable that, and that's how we do it. And our decision, whenever I make a wrong decision, is because I didn't do my decision memo. I just said, okay, look, I shouldn't say I'm the boss because my wife is a co-founder. So I say I'm one of the two bosses.
I can almost hear light bulbs going off all around the world and people thinking, why do we go in a meeting and waste an hour presenting something only to then to end the meeting and we're still no further forward because then you've got to give actions to people to give their feedback back. And you've actually solved most of the problems before the meeting even begins, right?
Yeah. It's amazing because in a meeting, often people talk just to sound smart.
Yeah.
That syndrome, like you just say something to sound smart or people get angry and in a doc, you don't write something to sound smart. It's going to look like an idiot, right? If you write something, you have to write something that's valuable to the document. So it erases all these pathological behaviors, and it gets to the point. So that's one other example of how we operate differently than other companies in how we make decisions, how we treat our employees. So the result, as I was saying, we have a very high retention, and we also have a very high pipeline of candidates. So more and more people hear about us, apply to come to work for us. And frankly, if I was in my 20s, out of a company where you can be like, I have 3 people right now in Tulum that just decided to go to Tulum to work from there, right? And so they're posting these shots of the little laptop in front of the margarita, on the beach. And you think, I would have wanted that job when I was in my 20s. I didn't like that suit and tie that I had to wear. I was in Bristol at the time, working for Lloyds Bank retail banking, and if I could have only been in Tulum, in my shorts, I would have wanted that job anytime. So I'm not surprised that we get a lot of applicants, and it's a very encouraging development in the world that we are now moving to this new model. It's going to make the work much more pleasant.
And one of the things I always like to try and talk about on this podcast is we'll talk with people that are solving real world problems with their technology. And I know you solve many problems for businesses. One in particular is something that everyone will go through, and that's how to acquire more customers. I know that's a topic very close to your heart, but for people that are hearing about ChiliPiper for the first time, could you just set the scene, talk about some of those problems that you're helping businesses solve? Right?
Yeah. Our core product solves the problem incredibly simple. So simple that when we faced it, we said that's impossible. I might be missing something. Yeah. And that's the following. Companies spend a lot of money, especially business to business, B2B, on marketing. So they bring a lot of people interested prospects to their website. The call to action is book a demo with us or talk to salespeople. So the prospect fills the form and submit that form to get a demo or a meeting. And that prospect gets a page to say, thank you, someone is going to call you. Typically, companies now assign what's called sales development reps, inbound SDRs to do that job. So these inbound sales reps, their job is to call and book the meeting. So I was talking to one of them in the early days of ChiliPiper and said, how is that going for you? And they said, it's going great. I'm converting at 40%. Wow. And I said, you mean to tell me that 100 people asked for a demo and 60 of them didn't? And it's nuts. And the reason why they thought it was cool is because there's these outbound sales reps who call people who've never asked for a demo and get a conversion rate of 1%, right? Because people just don't want the demo. Yeah. And it was just, oh, look, we're doing 40 times better. We're doing 40 times better, but the people ask for it. So we built this solution where it's a bit of JavaScript with a backend where when somebody submits the form in real time, we check that the person is qualified, right? Then we do what's called routing. So we retrieve the team that should be handling that particular prospect. Could be that somebody's already in the CRM or is a new customer. And we book, one click later, we book the meeting with the right person. So as a result, our conversion rates are between 80 and 90%, right? When you move from 40 to 80%. For obvious reason, it's because you no longer wait to book the meeting in one click later. So that's a problem we solved. Surprisingly, we were the only ones for the longest time. And as a result, we signed up all the cool companies that you can think of, Snowflake, Intuit, Airbnb, Spotify, Intuit, I mentioned, all the cool companies. Because it makes sense. I mean, if you think of it for a second, you think, why would I lose all my prospects who wanted to meet me when it is a simple solution that is going to solve the problem? So that's what we do. That's our core business.
And can you tell me a bit more about the value of leveraging emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence for things like inbound conversion? It's like a buzzword to a lot of people, isn't it? But there's real value to be had here.
Yeah. So once we start doing that, then you can always optimize, right? So when you're at 80%, so we've looked at the time that they're most likely to convert. So if you go offer sometimes, so you can offer all the abilities, but when you when somebody requests a meeting, you're going to offer all the abilities. But when you send an email out, you can't in the email put all the abilities. So what we're doing is doing some machine learning on the times that are much likely to be picked up.
Yeah.
And then that's what we suggest. So we found that if you suggest the right times, if I send you an email and say, Neil, let's get a meeting next week, assuming I'm selling something to you, right? Because if I have something to give you, then maybe you'll click anyway. But if I have something to sell to you and I'm in this position of requesting a meeting from you, if I send you precisely 5 options, so it's not 3, it's not 10, it's 5 options that have a certain peak in the timing, you are 5 times more likely to book that meeting. 5 times more likely. So that's how we optimize. We're starting looking at what how many suggestions are best, what times are best, and it can depend on the sales cycle. So companies with shorter sales cycle tend to give their times earlier on. So, for example, a customer of ours is a company called Square that do payment for small businesses, and all their sales are urgent. So people need a credit card processing solution. The small business, they need it immediately. So they book meeting in the afternoon, the morning for the afternoon, right? Whereas if you do companies like Snowflake that are more enterprise, then they can afford to book a meeting a couple of days later because people are not going to change their infrastructure overnight, and they can wait a couple of days. So we optimize also that's the machine learning. What does machine learning does? It optimizes also based on the company and the space they're in, and that's driven by data.
Before you came on the podcast today, I was doing a bit of research. I was also reading about your speed to lead approach, which helps businesses accelerate their B2B sales. Is that completely different to what you said, or is this?
No, it's very much the same. We have a debate internally with our marketing team or whether we want to say that we have optimized speed to lead, or we've actually gotten rid of speed to lead. And let me explain that. The speed to lead, the concept of speed to lead was a lead express interest, so they fill a form. How fast do you get to them? And there was tons of research to show that the faster you get to them, the more likely you are to convert in a very dramatic way. So, for example, if you wait more than 5 minutes, you're like 7 times less likely to get that lead, right? So, and there's a lot of, we just confirm it again. And it's surprising that companies actually do that. So, speed to lead means how fast do you respond when somebody raises their hand? At ChiliPiper, the answer is instantaneous. So, the prospect submit a form in real time. They presented with a bunch of options. They click and they booked. So that's a debate. We're saying that there's no longer an issue of speed to lead because it's instantaneous. I would say the speed to lead is now much more less, but it's a critical part. And as I mentioned, the results are super consistent and dramatic. We take everybody from 40% to 80%. I had a company in England. With a high volume of leads, and they had a very hard time following up with them. So they were getting 21% conversion, meaning that out of 100 people who would ask for a meeting, only 21 got that meeting. And we got them immediately to 65%. So like attending meetings. So imagine you triple your pipeline just because you've signed up with that solution. So that's speed to lead. It's a question whether soon everybody will be on ChiliPiper or equivalent, and they'll book meeting, and there will be no longer a question of speed to lead because it will no longer be an issue, or whether people will say, well, speed to lead is not very, very minimal, but that's the step change in the process that we're implementing.
And I also read that ChiliPiper was on track to see, so I think it was more than $20 million in revenue this year. So I've got to ask, what is the secret to your success? You just seem so far ahead of so many others out there that are just starting to find their way.
Yeah, no, 20 million is where we are now, and we have a much more ambitious goal for the end of the year. We bootstrapped the company with Alina. At the beginning, we just sold and used our cash to keep growing. And eventually, we attracted some interest from investors. So we raised last year $33 million from Tiger Global. So I'm sure you will believe me when I tell you that when you have $33 million in the bank, life is much easier. You can spend more money on acquisition. So instead of doubling, we close to tripled last year. Yeah. And this year we want to get on that same trajectory. So we aiming more in the 35 million range for the end of the year. And to answer your question, we have a product that has a super clear return on investment. Right, so go to people and say, try it. You'll see you're going to double your inbound conversion rate. So you have twice as much pipeline for the same dollar spent on marketing. So that's our secret. The other piece is that, I guess not so secret. The other piece is that when people book a meeting with ChiliPiper, they really enjoy the experience. So we have a lot of prospects coming inbound saying, hey, I just went to the Intuit site. I booked a meeting. It was so easy. I want the same thing for my prospects. Yeah. Right. So there's kind of what's called viral aspect to it. So that brings a lot of our prospect to us. So we're growing. I mean, the idea of, obviously, the world is moving towards more and more acquisition on the web, right? That's how it's happening. So more and more is happening on your website. So the conversion of these prospects that come into your website is critical. We call that inbound conversion. And so now we're expanding. We're building all the other tools that you may want to be able to convert well. So one of them is a chat, right? That you may want to, for those who are not quite ready to book a meeting, maybe they have a couple of questions, you want to be able to have a quick chat and then book a meeting. We also have this reassignment, so we call it handoff, where if somebody has booked a meeting with somebody and need to be passed on to somebody else, we're going to have that transition by retrieving the calendar of the other person and booking the meeting quickly. So we build the full solution for the inbound conversion, meaning that our product line is now larger, and as a result, we get more revenues. So that's certainly contributing to our growth also.
And so much has changed in the world over the last 2 years, and you guys have always been one step ahead. And I kind of guess that you're going to be one step ahead continuously. That's how you guys operate. So
yeah, that's a goal. That's a goal. We want to keep innovating. Yeah.
So are there any emerging technologies that you're monitoring, or is there anything that you're going to be focusing on the next 18 months that you can share?
The two things that are interesting, one of them is building a full solution for this inbound conversion. So looking at all the aspects of, it's interesting, the world of B2C is unbelievably optimized. So the bidding for advertising now in the B2C space is done by computers. There's no longer human deciding where to spend. The computers compute how much money to spend, the expected value, and in the B2B world, it's still very manual. It's still we assign a rep, we send things. So that's the direction we're taking, is to put a lot B2Cing the B2B world. So putting a lot of these computers and competition to help B2B optimize their conversion. That's a big trend that we're seeing.
Awesome. And we began the podcast today talking about your origin story and that meeting with Steve Jobs as well. But now we come full circle. I'm going to ask you to leave everyone listening with something inspirational. So whether it be a song that helps you get your head in the zone when working, or has inspired or accompanied your career, or maybe a book that has inspired you, is there anything you'd leave the listeners with that we can add to our list?
Yeah, I have been helped, I would say, by a song by your fellow citizens, the Beatles. And I need to give you a bit of background. When you're an entrepreneur, for some reason, it's feels that it's your job to fix the world. Like whatever happens is fixed. So I'll give you a good example. My niece, so my sister's daughter, was doing a university exchange in Moscow in January.
Yeah.
And we started seeing the danger, and my sister, so her mother, didn't act on it. And eventually, Alina, my wife, took it upon herself, and she booked a flight, and she just got it out of Russia. Right? She took action, even though she's not her daughter. She just took action. It reminds me of Ross Perot when there was these hostages in Iran, and he sent his own army to free the hostage, the entrepreneur Ross Perot. So as an entrepreneur, you always want to do things like that, but sometimes markets are stronger than you. And you just can't do it. And then you have to accept it. So the song that has helped me is actually the Paul McCartney song, Let It Be.
Yes.
Where, you say, sometimes you have to let it be. And I love that the what follows is that there will be an answer, right? There will be an answer. So let it be, there will be an answer. And it's very often, I think, look, anyway, I'm pissed off. I know this is not the way I want it to be, but you have to let it be. And there will be an answer.
Wow, what a great choice. For a moment there, I thought you were going to say back in the USSR. That is a much better choice.
That's right. That's probably not the right song.
Before I let you go, for anyone listening wants to find out more information about ChiliPiper, what you do, how you help people, and your whole culture there, what's the best starting point?
Yeah, we have a lot on our website. So if you come to the website, you'll get to experience our own technology, because you'll book a meeting with us using the ChiliPiper technology. We're also very active on social media, in particular LinkedIn. So a lot of information about what we do is on LinkedIn. That's the best way to find out about us. And we have this big effort right now. We were talking about back in the USSR, we had developers in Ukraine and Russia, and we very early on got them together and tried to send a message of peace. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So now we're very actively helping refugees. We have a foundation. We actually, when we raised $33 million, we put $1 million of the $32 million towards the foundation to help. It was last year. It was pre-science, I guess, because we thought we want to avoid violence in the world. And so we had this funding, and so we're helping refugees with this funding and helping non-government organizations deploy aid to Ukraine. We're very actively doing that. So you will also see that on our LinkedIn activity, and anybody who is interested in contribute can help.
Wow, that is a beautiful and inspirational moment to end on. Tech is a very dry subject, and somehow you've managed to make it cool today. We've had everything from Steve Jobs, the Beatles, using technology to make a difference in the world, and so much more. So thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and share your story with me today.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate it.
Wow, man. Absolutely loved chatting to Nicolas today, and hopefully we can stay in touch and get him back on towards the end of the year. It's great to hear how they're leveraging technology to increase conversion and drive more leads with that speed to lead approach. And the one problem that every business, no matter what industry that you're in, you're all going to have the same problem, and that is, how can I acquire more customers? So learning more about the ethos of the company and how they're using technology to do that, great stuff. Not to mention the Steve Jobs anecdote too. So a huge thank you to Nicolas for joining me on the podcast. If you've got any stories you'd like to share, you'd like to sit here with me on the podcast, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. But thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.